The afternoon sun filtered through the dusty windows of Murphy's bar, casting long shadows across the worn wooden floor. Margaret wiped down the counter with practiced efficiency, her white blouse crisp despite the long shift ahead. At 52, she had worked every kind of job imaginable, but waitressing at this roadside establishment paid the bills and kept food on her table. The familiar rumble of motorcycles announced the arrival of the evening crowd. Margaret looked up as the leather-clad bikers filed through the heavy oak door, their boots echoing against the floorboards. She recognized most of them as regulars, though they rarely spoke beyond ordering their drinks. Tonight felt different, somehow. There was tension in the air, thick as the cigarette smoke that usually hung over the pool tables. The bikers gathered around their usual corner, speaking in hushed tones that made Margaret's stomach tighten with unease. Jake, the group's apparent leader, stood apart from the others. His weathered face bore the lines of a man who had seen more than his share of hard times. Tattoos covered his muscular arms, telling stories of a life lived on the margins. His dark hair was pulled back in a neat ponytail, and despite his intimidating appearance, Margaret had always sensed something deeper beneath his rough exterior. As the evening progressed, the atmosphere grew more charged. Margaret moved between tables, serving drinks and trying to maintain her usual professional demeanor. But she could feel eyes watching her, conversations stopping when she approached certain tables. It started with whispers. Someone had been talking, spreading rumors about Margaret's past. In a small town, secrets had a way of surfacing like oil on water, no matter how deep you tried to bury them. Margaret had hoped those days were behind her, that the mistakes of her youth would stay buried where they belonged. The confrontation came suddenly. One of the younger bikers, emboldened by alcohol and peer pressure, stood up as Margaret passed. His table, his voice cut through the bar's ambient noise like a blade. "Hey everybody, look what we got here," he called out, his words slurred but loud enough for the entire establishment to hear. "Our sweet little waitress has some interesting history." Margaret's face flushed red, her hands trembling as she tried to continue her work. The bar fell silent except for the hum of the old jukebox in the corner. Every eye in the room focused on the unfolding drama. The young man reached out suddenly, grabbing at Margaret's blouse. "Why do not you show everyone what you are really made of?" he sneered. The fabric tore with a sharp ripping sound that seemed to echo through the stunned silence. Margaret's white shirt split open, but instead of revealing what the troublemaker expected, something else caught everyone's attention. There, across Margaret's chest and shoulder, was an intricate tattoo of a Marine Corps emblem, surrounded by names and dates. The artwork was old but beautifully detailed, clearly done by a master artist. Below it, in elegant script, were the words Semper Fi and a list of battles from decades past. The bar remained frozen in absolute silence. Jake's expression changed completely. His eyes widened as he took in the significance of what he was seeing. Without hesitation, he stepped forward, his massive frame moving with surprising gentleness. He shrugged off his leather jacket and carefully placed it around Margaret's shoulders, covering her torn shirt and preserving her dignity. "Ma'am," he said softly, his voice carrying a respect that had not been there before. "Thank you for your service." The words hung in the air like a benediction. The other bikers, many of whom were veterans themselves, began to understand. This was not just any waitress they had been watching and whispering about. This was a fellow warrior, someone who had earned the right to respect through sacrifice and service. Margaret's eyes filled with tears, not of shame but of recognition. For the first time in years, someone saw her for who she really was, not for the mistakes she had made afterward. Jake's simple gesture of covering her with his jacket spoke volumes about honor, respect, and the unbreakable bond between those who had served. The young troublemaker, sobered by the gravity of what he had revealed, stepped back in shame. The other patrons began to see Margaret differently, their assumptions crumbling in the face of this new understanding. Jake extended his hand to Margaret. "Would you allow me to buy you a coffee when your shift ends?" he asked. "I think we have some stories to share." Margaret nodded, unable to speak past the emotion in her throat. For the first time in years, she felt seen, understood and valued for the person she truly was underneath all the pain and regret. As the evening continued, the atmosphere in Murphy's bar transformed completely. The bikers treated Margaret with newfound respect, and other patrons began to see beyond their own prejudices. Sometimes it takes just one moment, one revelation, to change everything. That night, two souls who had been wounded by life found understanding in each other. Jake and Margaret discovered that beneath leather and uniforms, beyond mistakes and regrets, lay the enduring truth that we are all more than the sum of our worst moments. The bar would never be quite the same, and neither would they.